Welcome to Mid-Century Living, your weekly nostalgia podcast about the best of technology and culture from the mid-20th century.
Welcome to episode 25 of Mid-Century Living, the show where we talk all about the best of the mid-20th century and how to add vintage vibes to your modern life. We are hosts Gonzalo
and Jackie. Thank you for joining us today. So today we're talking about the GE combination refrigerator freezer. A very cool bit of technology from the mid-century. But first, Gonzalo, how was your week?
My week was good, productive, I guess. So we are recording on the tail end of what was my spring break. But I was very productive. I had a lot of stuff that I had to take care of this week, and I took care of almost everything. But one of the things that I did was I have this space in my house in the kitchen by these windows that when I bought the house came with some built-in rickety shelves, which I never liked. I removed those last year, and then I had a new it's like a window bench seat. That's what it. So this kind of like inset out. So I had a new top put to the bench made out of wood, and I always knew I was going to put some IKEA shelves there. So what I did was I IKEA hacked, and I painted these shelves, and then I painted the bench part, and then like the surround around the window, so it looks like one giant piece. And I think it turned out well. But I will say, for those of you DIYers out there, painting IKEA shelves sucks if you don't do it right. And I didn't do it right.
Oh, do you have to sand the finish off first? Is that what you skipped?
I skipped the primer part. Apparently, you're supposed to put primer on it so that the paint adheres to it. The problem is that the paint didn't adhere, so every time you touched the shelves, the paint would come off.
Oh.
So, I mean, it is what it is. Once I let the paint cure, like right now, if I will put my hand on it, it's fine. But it turned out nice, I think.
Oh, good.
But
that sounds productive.
Yeah. How about your week?
My week was good. So last week was our St. Patrick's Day episode, and now we're recording right after that. So all of my updates are St. Patrick's related updates. So basically, the week of St. Patrick's Day, I made a new dress, and I made these not vintage but Betty Crocker stout chocolate cupcakes for the work potluck. And also, I think it's pretty cool that Betty Crocker has recipes on her website that involve adding beer to her cake mixes. So that's pretty cool. So I made that, and those were a big hit, and we had like a very fun potluck at work. And I'm just basically finalizing my menu for the actual St. Patrick's Day dinner, which I'm not going to get into because by the time this episode comes out, everyone will be tired of St. Patrick's Day chat. So
is that even possible?
I don't know. That's the thing, is like I feel like we're talking about it too much, but I'm basically making the same. So my big new exciting thing I was making that I made this year were the stout cupcakes, which were delicious. Have you ever baked with beer?
I've never baked with beer, no.
I'm going to find more beer-related recipes.
Actually, that's a lie. I make some pretty good beer bread. I don't know how I missed this part, but yeah, I make some really good beer bread.
One of my coworkers made beer bread for a potluck once, and she was like, oh, I just needed a recipe I didn't have to think about, so I made beer bread. And I'm just like always shocked whenever someone's like, oh, I just needed a really easy throw together recipe, so
it's so simple. 3 ingredients. That's it.
But it's baking. Like, I just needed something not to think, so I did science.
Yeah, but beer bread is simple. It's like can of beer, a certain amount of flour. I have it written down, and then a half cup of sugar, and that's it. And then you mix it all together, and then you put it in the oven, and 45 minutes later, you got bread.
Oh, that is easy.
Yeah.
Does it change flavor based on the flavor of the beer?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm making some with pumpkin beer this fall.
There you go. Pumpkin beer bread? Are you kidding me?
That sounds awesome.
Delicious.
Oh my goodness, I want to make it right now. I don't have any pumpkin beer left from
last week.
Yeah, from last week. Yeah, they did have that like stout, but I have heard that you're not supposed to use dark beer for beer bread.
Says who?
I don't the law. I don't know. Like who makes the baking rules? That's what it said. It said not dark beer. Well, the recipe that the coworker shared was something very similar. I think hers had 4 ingredients, but I could be wrong. But it had like an asterisk that said not dark beer.
I've never made it with a stout,
I
so I
feel
don't
like
know.
that would be more delicious, but I don't know.
Yeah, like a Young's double chocolate stout beer bread, with a little bit of peanut butter on it. Listeners, now we've gone off the rails.
Well, or did we? Because maybe this is another good episode to talk about food chat during the weekly catch up because we're talking about kitchen related things. So, Gonzalo, have you ever heard of this particular GE combination fridge?
Yes. Okay. So actually, I got lost in an Instagram rabbit hole, and I found an account that restores all kinds of vintage appliances. Unfortunately, when I went to go write down their tag so that I could give them a shout out, I don't know what I did with my phone, but I closed out the Instagram app, and then I couldn't find it again.
Oh,
I
no,
swear
now
I'm
they're
not a
gone
Luddite. I
forever.
just don't know how to use technology. But anyway, one of the items on their page that I watched their reel on like repeat was the GE combination fridge with their revolving Lazy Susan shelves and stuff, and it really helped that the reel had the zombies as their music because it just played on repeat for a while.
Yes, this is one of my favorite fridges, as you touched on. This is the one, everyone's seen it, where the shelves are Lazy Susans. They're like half circles that spin out and back in. So, another bit of vintage ingenuity that they just don't make them like that anymore.
Yeah, they really
So
don't.
this has always been one of my favorite fridges. So it was really fun to do a little deep dive into it for this episode. But first, since you're the history guy, do you want to tell us a little bit about GE?
Sure. So GE stands for General Electric, and their beginnings start actually as the Edison General Electric Company, which was founded in 1889 by Thomas Edison and also J.P. Morgan.
Cool.
Yeah. And they were major competitors to another company called the Thomson Houston Electric Company. And I checked just to make sure that it was Houston, based off Houston, the city, and it's not. The founder's name was Edwin J. Houston. So, womp
Oh.
womp. But in 1892, they merged those two companies to form General Electric. And fun fact, in 1986, General Electric acquired RCA Corporation, which made like digital video recording type stuff, and NBC.
Neat.
Yeah. But the fridge actually comes from a company called the GE Appliances. And in 1907, GE established the GE Appliances division to provide consumers with appliances, and they're responsible for many innovations, such as the first self-cleaning oven, the first over-the-range microwave, and the first suite of Wi-Fi connected appliances. Hint: those are not from the mid-century.
No.
Yeah. Oh, and in 1947, they came out with the first two-door refrigerator freezer combination. So
Very cool.
Yep. So prior to World War II, about half of the families in the USA had a refrigerator. So by 1950, which is post-war, the USA was the only country where domestic refrigeration was extensively used, meaning that 80% of the families reportedly had refrigerators. And it won't be until 1980 that it was virtually 100%. So GE made a lot of really cool, innovative refrigerators and other kitchen appliances during this time period. Hopefully, we'll get to dig into those in future episodes. But some other examples are the wall-mounted refrigerator, which can be installed directly above a work counter. So that gives you room in the kitchen for extra base cabinets, so more storage. They also came out with this concept called the Wonder Kitchen, which is a whole suite of appliances meant to encourage the built-in look. And then some fun stuff also on General Electric. You guys may be familiar with the logo, the GE logo. It looks somewhat the same since 1909. So the font really would change a little bit. The thickness changed to what we have now. And then in 2004, we got the light blue logo that we recognize today. So I never saw this until I read about it. but the GE, the cursive or monogrammed GE letters, are stylized to resemble a depiction of a stove burner, one of the main appliances that GE mass produced.
Very cool. That's a lot of detail they put into that.
It really is. I had no idea about any of that until I researched. Why don't we talk a little bit about the fridge? Sorry, I went on a tangent.
No, that's fine. Love that extra bit of history. So, the combination refrigerator freezer that we're talking about today, while super cool, unlike the Frigidaire Flare, there's not one big excellent resource on the internet that just has all of this information super easy for you to grab. So, I actually kind of had to get sleuthy about researching for this episode. So, all of the following data was pieced together from a combination of vintage ads, pages from like Etsy and eBay listings for the production manuals, because there's no production manuals or owner's manuals like uploaded for free on the internet like they were for the Flare. And some posts from people who actually own these fridges in a Vintage Appliances Facebook group that we will link to in the show notes. As you mentioned, the first combination refrigerator freezer was actually made by them in 1947, but the combination capital C refrigerator freezers that we're talking about today with the revolving shelves were only made from 1954 to 1958. The revolving shelves were an included feature on all of their refrigerator models for at least part of that time period. Again, could not really pin down exactly what year to which year from
Mm-hmm.
the data I could find. So here's a marketing line about the revolving shelves from an ad from likely 1955. Quote, "A simple twist of the wrist and the back area of the revolving shelves is right in front. Furthermore, the inside refrigerator walls are rounded to accommodate extra large shelves." So hopefully
Interesting.
that's painting a little bit of a like word picture for you guys. Another thing to add to the visualization of this very cool, very cute fridge is that throughout their run, these fridges came in white, buttercup yellow, turquoise, and pink. The revolving shelves and all of the shelves in there were either silver or copper. I'm pretty sure that the copper ones were in the later models specifically.
Mm-hmm.
The interior colors were white, pink, or blue, and it wasn't necessarily the same color as the outside of the fridge. So, my favorite combination I found, I think, is a yellow exterior with a blue interior.
Interesting. Like pastel colors, I'm imagining, right?
It's very, very pastel-y, but it might just because I'm like in a springy mood right now. But there was another one that was a little bit more subtle that was a white exterior, and then when you open it, the fridge interior is yellow, but the freezer interior is blue.
Mm. So this Instagram account that I had stumbled on, that I mentioned earlier, they had repainted the GE combination fridge to a very like shiny, like curish, like shiny maroon,
Huh.
and it looked really good because they had taken like all the like the handle and stuff, and everything was chrome. So like it looked really cool.
I mean, from what I've found, people rarely find these in the wild in perfect condition. They usually have to be refurbed in some way, and if you want to paint it to match your kitchen,
Yeah.
sure. Some people I can see arguments for both directions. Like you either want to keep it period accurate or you want it to match your kitchen, and I think both are totally valid.
Well, I like things if they're meant to be period, they should stay period.
So I was able to track down from my sleuthing the most details on two very specific models from of this fridge. The LH121L, which was from 1954, the first year that these fridges were made, and the LM11N, which was from 1956. So I'll start with the earlier model first. So I'm pretty sure that this model is from 1954 because one, the ad says new revolving shelves, so we know this is going to be the first year that they were produced.
Hmm.
The fridge is white with a white interior, and from what I read, only the early fridges were white. Um, and then also, this fridge has latch closures on the doors, and we both found in our research separately that the latch fridges were discontinued in 1955 so that kids don't get locked inside fridges. I also just find it fascinating that there was a huge problem of just like children crawling into fridges. But maybe the reason we don't do that now is because we know that you will get locked in there if you do that. But anyway, so some details of this specific fridge. So it quote, holds more than 12 cubic feet of fresh and frozen foods, unquote. And for comparison, modern side-by-side refrigerator freezer combos have about 24 cubic feet, so it is a very, very small fridge.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another way that they phrase explaining the freezer. So it is built just like a floor-type freezer. It has its own separate refrigerating system, its own separate door, and it keeps up to 89 packages of frozen foods as long as a year.
89, not 90.
I also wonder how standard all of the frozen food packages were back then, and also 89 packages of frozen food. Like even if you're just picturing 89 lean cuisines, I mean that's a pretty sizable. I can't for a fridge half the size of a normal fridge or a modern
Yeah.
fridge. That's pretty. You can fit a lot in that freezer.
I struggle to find space in my freezer, and I have
Yeah.
got a more modern one. I think mine's from the 90s.
Yeah, I don't know what year mine is from.
Mine's a General Electric though.
I don't know what mine is. I never look. It just all my appliances are modern and ugly, so I just don't even look at them. I just look away.
Well, to keep, and I'm not saying this just because of our podcast, but my range is a Frigidaire, which means my oven's a Frigidaire oven, and then my refrigerator is a General Electric.
Oh, good. You're right on brand. So they have an automatic defrosting refrigerator. The section is completely automatic, no clock to set, no buttons to push, no pans to empty. Humidity is controlled so that foods remain moist cold and fresh. So please note that they did not say that the freezer was automatic defrosting, and that's because it is not. Freezers at this time had to be manually defrosted once a month, but more on that later. And this ad actually had the cost listed on the ad. So this fridge, if you bought it brand new in 1954, would cost $525.96 with a payment plan that got it down to $5.25 a week with a, quote, small down payment, which is, and I Googled it, $6,000 in today's money.
Jeez.
With $60 weekly payments.
Jeez.
And to compare, just for scale, if you went out right now and bought a 12 cubic foot GE fridge freezer, brand new at Home Depot or whatever, it would range in price from $300 to $900, depending on if you got stainless steel or not.
That's a big jump. You know how much mine was?
How much?
Free. Actually, no, it cost me several thousand, but it came with a house.
I think that completes all of my thoughts on their earliest model. So now let's jump up a few years to 1956. This is when this fridge gets really exciting because they introduce a lot more cool features that when most people rave, after you get over the revolving Lazy Susan shelves, which are super cool, you get to more very cool features that they added. So the introduction for the LM11N from the manual that I found was, well, a scan of one page of the manual. So anyway, it's rough out there. This is, quote, both a true 0-degree freezer and an automatic defrosting refrigerator section behind the single door. Foot pedal opens the door. Yes, one door, but it's a fridge and a freezer. So how this model works, and it was one of 3 that came out this year and the only one that does this, it has one main door that you open and you see that it opens to reveal the fridge and the freezer in one big section, but the freezer is its own little section at the top, and it has its own little glass door that says freezer on it. And you open that to get inside, so it's not like your freezer. It's exposed to the room every time you open the fridge, and it's also very cute.
Cool.
So, here's a list of all the cool features included in this model. And I'll elaborate a little bit on some of the particularly cool things. So this one had 2 revolving shelves and 1 stationary. The shelf at the top is still like a semicircle, but that one stays still. You only can revolve the middle 2. So it's 3 shelves total and 2 of them spin. It has a magnetic door. The refrigerator defrosts. It has a big 70-pound true 0-degree freezer. It has removable adjustable door shelves. This is pretty neat. So the walls of the fridge have little notches so you can move your shelves up and down. It comes with 3 mini cube ice trays, and they were just 3 metal removable ice cube trays that you fill yourself and put back in the freezer. So it has fold away bottle racks, which is like a swing down wire rack at the top of the fridge to hold milk bottles for back when milk used to be delivered and came in bottles. And instead of like having them stand upright, taking up a big chunk of fridge space, they built this like rack where you just like slide them in horizontal.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty cool. It has a butter compartment with a heater, so you can actually
Oh.
set the butter to the temperature you want so that it's always spreadable, but it's not on the counter.
Oh, I like that because I always have to remember if I want buttered toast, I have to take the butter out of the fridge, wait an hour, and then go and toast my bread.
And you don't have to worry about it being too hot in the summer or not heat like warming enough in the winter. Like you can just pick your favorite butter temperature and your butter's always that temperature.
Yes. Okay, so I don't know. I'm going to tangent for a second. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I didn't know you could keep your butter out of the fridge. I thought it
Yes.
always went in the fridge. And I was up in Michigan visiting a friend. I don't know, this was years ago. And the butter was on the counter. And a little butter dish, I was like, where do I put this? He goes, just leave it on the counter. And I go, but no, it goes in the fridge. He goes, not up here. It doesn't.
So there were three models, I think I mentioned before, available this year. And all of the models had magnetic doors, automatic defrosting refrigerator sections. The freezer and refrigerator had their own cooling systems each, and there were extra coils below the ice cube tray shelves. They all had removable adjustable door shelves. They all had fold-away bottle racks, and they all had egg racks and butter compartments.
Hmm.
The other two models both had two doors instead of one, so the fridge and freezer opened separately, so it didn't have that like cute interior glass door for the freezer. And these other two models also had a meat tray that came with it that was like a metal cheese wedge shaped like high-sided tray that says meat on it, so it's like shaped like a wedge of the semicircle that the spinning shelves are.
Uh-huh.
And it just says meat on it. I'm guessing that's just like so that it doesn't drip to your food.
Meat, unwrapped meat.
So like now it's best practices to put your meat on the totally bottom shelf because you don't want it dripping all its meat juices down onto everything. And
Sure, let's pretend that I do that.
okay, well the paranoia best practices I follow mostly due to like Food Network telling me how to stock my fridge is that you always keep your raw meat on the very bottom shelf so that it doesn't drip onto anything, and if you can, you keep it in like a container so that if it leaks inside the container and not
Okay.
onto your produce and everything. I thought that was actually cool. And then the LH14N model was the biggest of the three, and the difference with this one is the freezer was actually on the bottom, and it has two drawers inside it and a little rack on the side that looks kind of like a shoe rack where you can put your ice cube trays. And it had one taller mystery tray in there, and because I could not find an actual scan of the full thing, I couldn't see what was special about that fourth mystery tray. So if anyone has the LH14N model with the freezer on the bottom and wants to tell me what the trays were, please send us a DM on Instagram at MCL Podcast because I'm genuinely curious. And that was a very cool fridge. And that is all the eats that I was able to cobble together. I cannot wait until you listeners see all of the fun photos and possibly video we post of this to our Instagram stories and Instagram reels. Because, like, I'm sure all this sounds cool, but it looks even cooler because it's all cute. Like,
Yes.
really adorable mid-century design. Like, the vegetable drawers say vegetables on them in cursive. Like, it's just, wait till you see it. It's a real treat.
Yes.
So, since we're done with that, I suppose we can transition into the connection to today. So, you've got a little bit of extra GE history for us?
Yes, because I have to nerd out on history because I'm a history teacher. No, okay, so I said earlier how the appliances come from a division of General Electric called GE Appliances. Well, it turns out that since 2016, GE Appliances is no longer part of General Electric, right? It is now the subsidiary of a Chinese appliance manufacturer known as the Haier Group. Now, they still use the GE brand name under licensing agreement. However, they're no longer controlled by GE.
Fascinating.
If you are looking at vintage GE fridges specifically, and you're like, well, which model do I have? When was it made, etc.? This is how you determine the age of your fridge. So the serial number, not the model number, the serial number begins with 2 letters and are followed by 6 numbers. The first 2 letters tell you the month and the year it was made. The first one's a month, second one's a year. Now, the month letter makes absolutely no sense. Like, A is January, which makes sense. B is not February, though. It's not until D that you get to February. F, G, H are March through May, and then you skip again to get to April. It's just, it would make more sense if it was like A, January, B, February, C, March, and so on, but it's not.
Ugh.
And then the second letter, which is the one that tells you the year, rotates approximately every 12 years. So an L fridge is 1954, M is 1955, and so on. It goes alphabetically. And then it'll recycle at L again about 12 years later. So in 1960s, they were more L fridges.
Oh, so you may be wondering, should you buy a vintage fridge if you get a good deal on Marketplace? Well, unlike with the Frigidaire, honestly, it seems like a little bit more work. So, one main thing about it is that you're now going to have to defrost your freezer, which a lot of us, at least in my generation, never had to do. So that's a new skill you'll have to learn. Gonzalo has a story.
It sucks. So growing up until like the early thousands, yeah, because my parents got the house to live in 01, and we still had this appliance. But this freezer, it didn't defrost automatically, and you had to defrost it every so often. And you would know it was defrosting time whenever you couldn't close it because the ice was so thick. And you literally had to like unplug it or turn it off, and then like let it sit until it melted enough that you could chip away. And obviously there was always water everywhere because it's melting ice. But when you're a little kid, you got to grab a butter knife and chisel away at the ice, which was okay fun.
Oh man, yeah, it does. It looks like a mess. I never, we never had an old fridge that was old enough to do that. So another thing to consider is the size. So as I mentioned earlier, modern side-by-side refrigerator freezer combos have about 12 cubic feet. The like big fridges from this time period were like 14 cubic feet. So to most people, it's little. And also, this is just a theory I have. I don't know if I'm Gonzalo. I want you to like architect fact check this for me, but I feel like a lot of kitchens are designed these days with like fridge shaped holes, and there's a chance that your vintage fridge might end up looking silly in the fridge shaped hole that is assuming you're going to have a fridge twice as large.
Yes, fact checked. Most of the times you have a 3-foot gap between countertops and at least 6-foot high piece, or not piece but hole.
So I actually have the specifications of the 1954 model, the first one we talked about, and it is 60 inches tall, 31 inches wide, with a overall depth of 29 inches, which is about the same. So I went and compared it to 11.6 cubic foot fridge freezer from GE today, which is 59.8 inches tall, 24 inches wide, and 28.6 inches deep. So it is the same size as a fridge freezer of the same size. So another little detail of this, though, is even though it's taking up the same like space, the capacity is different. Well, the total capacity is 11.4 to 11.6, but the freezer is bigger. The rated voltage in the original model is 115 volts, and the modern one is 120 volts, which kind of transitions me into thoughts on energy. So there's a lot of people fighting. I was in a lot of blogs and Facebook groups. So the people in the Vintage Appliance Facebook group are all saying that they use much less energy and they're not any more expensive and they're not big energy hogs and they love their vintage freezers and their workhorses and they're fine. And then if you go to like Reddit and say, look at my cool old fridge, it still works like a charm, appliance guy here comments on all the posts and says like, this is like, it's a total waste of energy. All these things are super inefficient. So I went and found this very interesting article that I'll also link in the show notes that has a little chart comparing energy use per year of the new fridges from 1947 to 2002. And the chart goes straight up to 1977 and then comes right back down to 2002. So basically 1950s fridges used 400 to 700 kilowatts per year. And then in the 60s and 70s, they went from 700 kilowatts per year to 1900 kilowatts per year. It just like, they got super crazy. They kept like adding in stuff, and they just, I guess the technology wasn't catching up to the innovation, and it was bad. And then somewhere around there, they started dropping back down, probably from. We did mention in our drive-in episode that there was an energy crisis happening in the late 70s. Also, that's when daylight savings time started, and people were encouraged not to use as many cars. So, trying to get your appliances as efficient as possible probably kicked around this time too. And so it started going all the way down, and then by 1992, it was back down to 800 kilowatts, and it stays there through the year 2000, and then it starts dropping again. And now national regulations actually cap new fridges being made at 300 kilowatts for residential fridges. So somebody on Reddit actually metered their vintage fridge, and over 11 hours, it consumed 0.99 kilowatts, which means it would be around 788.4 kilowatts per year, which would cost about $110 per year at 14 cents a kilowatt. I did not check my utility bill to see how much my fridge costs, but somebody could do that if they wanted to. So basically, the takeaway, I think, about should you get a vintage fridge is up to you and your personal choice and aesthetic and lifestyle choices. And that is everything I've got on this vintage fridge and vintage fridge lifestyles. So,
well, thank you for that. I would love a vintage refrigerator, but also I would just love a new fridge because I don't like how mine looks because it's old. Well, now that we've caught up to the present and that Jackie has redesigned my kitchen for me, it is time for our etiquette segment. So why don't I get us started on today's etiquette?
Yes.
So since we're talking about the GE combination fridge, I thought that chapter 30, titled Informal Entertaining, from Amy Vanderbilt's complete book of etiquette from 1957, would work. Even though we didn't really talk about entertaining, but, food.
Yeah, food.
Anyway, according to Vanderbilt, there's an Albanian proverb that goes, quote, "Every guest hates the others, and the host hates them all," end quote.
Whoa.
Yes. The intro to the chapter talks about how entertaining should be just for fun. A good rule to follow is to never do business over dinner. Entertaining at home should have no strings attached. And that if the house looks as if it expected and welcomed guests, if the host and hostess are relaxed and smiling, then the guests will feel at home and at ease. So in order to keep the peace while entertaining, let's look at some etiquette tips for informal entertaining. And for this chapter, informal entertaining means the seated dinner of 4 to 8 guests who may or may not be in evening dress. So it's there's a lot of, so this chapter is very long. It's got a lot of really good info. So today that's why I'm only focusing on the informal or the semi-formal dinner party. But when inviting people, the successful hostess, and it's 1957 book, so it could be the host today. But the successful hostess never includes too new or difficult guests. If all your guests are new and have never met before, or hope to never meet again after your dinner, this can, quote, do a social violence to the most adequately planned evening.
Social violence.
Yes. So invitations should usually be phoned or given by word of mouth because it's informal. The hostess always tenders the invitation, but for convenience sake, her husband may do so by saying something like, "Hey, Mary would like you to come for dinner Friday at 7:30." Something as simple as that.
Okay.
Guests should not disappoint the hostess at last minute without a, quote, believable excuse such as illness. Neither should they ask to bring another guest.
Yes.
I like that there's rules against someone backing out last minute. I don't know if you've ever hosted a dinner, but I like cooking for people. And if I've planned a dinner and I have 8 guests and one's like, "Hey, I can't make it," I don't know, it throws things off.
Especially if you're doing something like you tend to do where it's like individual Cornish hens. Now
Yes.
you have an extra hen.
Yes. When arriving, so the host and hostess need to welcome the guests. They should be on duty in the living room 5 minutes before the appointed start time. And guests should arrive promptly or up to 10-15 minutes later than the time.
There she is again with her 10-minute grace period for arrival
Yes.
times. Okay.
Now, the reasoning is that they should assume that if the dinner party starts at 7, they will be seated for dinner at 7. Although in metropolitan areas lateness is more accepted, in the West and Midwest, guests begin to arrive 30 minutes earlier. The hostess should also not wait for latecomers to begin dinner, unless it's the guest of honor, in which case it would be awkward to start dinner, right?
Right.
Now, if the latecomer is the guest of honor, the hostess still starts dinner if it's been way too long. Now, when they arrive, he or she enters the dining room as quietly as possible and goes briefly to the hostess to make an apology and sits where indicated. Now, if the latecomer is a woman, the man to her right should rise as she sits. And the hostess, regardless of how she really feels about it, always minimizes the inconvenience to her as well as the other guests. And last thing about informal dinners, when entering the dining room, small parties do not need place cards. That would be a formal dinner.
Okay.
The hostess announces dinner and leads the women guests into the dining room first, and the men follow, with the host bringing up the rear. So, what do you think?
I love this chapter. I have some questions. There's no, like, mingling cocktail appetizer thing, or is that a totally different kind of dinner?
There's a different kind of. This is an informal dinner party.
So there really is. There's not caked into every dinner party the like cocktail hour at the beginning. Everyone's supposed to like walk in the door and immediately sit down at the dinner table.
Well, no, you should arrive there early to mingle, right? Midwesterners arrive 30 minutes before the appointed time. If I say 7, it should be expected to be eating at 7. So you should arrive earlier so that you're not rushing in the door and into the dining
Because
room.
it doesn't say arrive earlier, it says arrive promptly.
Well,
Or
yeah,
up to 10 to 15 minutes later.
I guess so then. I don't know.
So if the dinner party starts at 7, you're supposed to arrive at 7 or 7:15 tops and go straight to the dinner table. But maybe
Yeah,
that's
it's
how
like-
you're supposed to. So really, like, I take your coat and you just sit down.
Although it does also say that the hostess would walk the people into the dining room. So maybe it's like, hey, Jim, thanks for coming. Let me take your coat. Here, meet Samantha in the living room. We'll be starting in a few minutes while I welcome Charles.
So maybe this is like actually better because that's something one of my mental barrier to entries on entertaining for dinner is because my kitchen is so visible.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm still like if people come over and dinner's not ready already, they have to watch me cook basically. So maybe this is better if I do this kind of style where
Maybe.
they walk in the door at 7 and dinner is on the table, like sit
Yeah.
down. And we're not waiting for anybody.
No, and if they do, they better walk in silently and then come over and apologize to you.
Well, I don't know. I guess I came back around then. I think I love all of these rules.
I love them.
I vote we keep them. Every single one.
I think so too. So let's go ahead and give it that mid-century stamp of approval as approved.
When we get a bigger budget, we need to add like an approval soundbite here.
Awesome. Well, it looks like we've landed the plane. So thank you guys all for listening today. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the show and tell a friend.
You can also follow us on Instagram at MCL Podcast. This is the best place to send us feedback and episode suggestions. So feel free to send us a DM anytime.
Perfect. Thanks guys for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Bye!
Thank you for listening to Mid-Century Living. Please subscribe, tell your friends, and leave a review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at MCL Podcast. See you next Friday.